All right, let's try this. I don't know. I think it was that stream. It looks good now. Don't say unstable. I don't know what that was. I'll just give everybody a few minutes to get back in. But yeah, I ended that stream. It appears it might have just been the stream I did, but I don't know what the hell that was because I checked everything on my end. My internet is good. Checked the modem. Modem's got all the lights on it, showing me a good connection here. So I don't know if it was just that stream. And then I actually went surfing other pages, and it was surfing the internet fine. So it definitely was something with YouTube. So I don't know what the fuck it was, but anyway, I'll keep my eye on it. Now, if I'm going to, yeah, Naldo, you're funny. That's where the mind was wandering. That's funny. I'll keep my eye on it. If I'm reading, I'll try to pop in to make sure. Again, it was definitely something only with the YouTube because I was checking just random spots on the internet and it was fine. I didn't have any issues. So anyway, hopefully it's fixed. It appears to be fine now. It looks like the connection is stable. Where I was at, but yeah, I was talking about how we deal with the now. That's where I kind of left off. When dealing with time, because as I said before, yesterday it's gone. Tomorrow's not guaranteed to come. So the only thing that's important is now, and what you're doing here is important. So we don't subscribe to a concept that there's some great reward waiting for us later down the road. That's not what we do. Okay. When we deal with the now, it means do something now to be productive, to master yourself, to be successful. There's nothing or nobody you're going to be able to pray to fix that for you. All right. There's nothing you're going to be able to seek externally that's going to get your shit in order. And when I was talking about shadow work earlier, and we talk about the klepothic realm and demonic abode, it's not always a pleasant thing, and I can't stress that enough. It's not pleasant because it brings up sometimes a lot of personal trauma. It could be personal trauma from years back. It could be personal trauma recently, currently around you, or within the last 6 months to a year, etc. And sometimes that's not an easy pill to swallow. So Samael, right? Let's read a little bit about the origins of Samael. And again, I mentioned earlier before the connection got jacked up, and hopefully everybody gets back in here. I'm going to go to a PDF document that you can find on Scribe. It's called Sons of Samael. It's only 16 pages, but it gives you a good understanding this aspect of the adversary that we call Samael. All right, so I'm going to go through some of this stuff here. The name Samael is Hebrew, Samael. Every Hebrew letter has meanings and numbers related to it. When we look at the components of this word, Samael, we see that it ends with L. L is actually the definite article. So I'm going to correct something that you're going to hear here. El in Hebrew means God. That's not really true. Because when you say El Elo, you're saying the source. Just like in Arabic, A-L, al. They call it when you learn the language, it's the definite article. It is short, El. You'll even find it in Matthew chapter 27, verse 46 in the form of Eli, E-L-I. But in essence, that's really, I don't know if I would say that that's what it means, but just so you know, it's the definite article. In the Bible, there are places where the most holy God is also called Elohim. It's plural for gods or gods and goddesses. Elohim comes from El. Now, especially when you look in the first chapter of Genesis, right? When you read Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28, right? It's very tricky when you're reading the English to see this word, right? you'll see God is so-called speaking. Now, I'm speaking from a monotheistic viewpoint. I want to make that clear. Where he says, and let us, right, make man in our own image and likeness, right? Male and female created he, them, told them to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. More late to refill the information that something was already here, but we'll get into that in a minute. But the see there where it says, and let us, is the Elohim. As it says here, the author of this article, it's plural for a group of beings, or as they use here, or goddesses. This is important to understand because unfortunately, when most religious people read the Bible, they're only reading it from very poor English translations. But when we're going more in depth in our study, and especially when we're working with some of these spirits and demons, we really need to understand origin, what the breakdown of the names mean. That doesn't mean you need to be, and if you have the time, power to you. It doesn't mean you have to be a certified linguistic scholar, but you should have a good general understanding of the etymologies of these words, all right? In Hebrew, Samael is spelled Samak, Mem, Alif, Lamed, right? That's how you get the S, the M-A-L. So Samak, Mem, Aleph, Lamed, right? Samael, 4 letters. This is a 4-letter name of God, a tetragrammation. The first portion of the name, Samak Mem, Sam, bitter, beverage, drug, poison, toxin, medicine, potion, perfume. Now, some will say the basic breakdown of Samael's name, meaning poison those of El, right? You'll hear this in some circles. Now, that could be looked at 2 ways. I'm going to stop there. Let me just check on the connection, make sure we're good. Hold on. I think we're good. All right. Now, somebody that might be faith-based or religious hears that and says, that sounds very wicked. Poison those of El. Well, when we talk about poison those of El, the false god El, the false god that indoctrinates people with delusions, faith, belief, poison and destroy all of those false ideologies. That's what Samael does, okay? Samael, by way which some might label as his poison, he destroys those illusions. Don't look how we look at it from our perspective. That's the focus we need to look at it when we're working with this particular form of the adversary. You want to tap into the aspect of Samael to destroy those ways about yourself, the illusions. Remember, doing real shadow work is removing all the illusions that you've created about yourself. And that has happened in monotheistic faith-based religions. There are these false veils that are put there. There's these false promises. There's these delusions along with illusions. We pretty much try to do it completely the opposite way. We don't want any veils there. We don't want any illusions. We want to see things spiritually for what they are so we can get to truly understand who we really are. All right? So to this, and once I'm done going through this, I will go into the chat and take your questions and your comments, so just be patient, especially if you're new to the channel. All right? So that's the basic, quick, you might hear definition, poison those of El, the breakdown. But let's go a little bit further, right? Outside of Sam or Samak Mem, bitter beverage, drug, poison, toxin, medicine, potion, perfume, the name Samael means the medicine of God, right? Here's another breakdown: the perfume of God, the poison of God, the drug of the beverage of God. All these are accurate translations. Now, here's the deep thing. You need all that when dealing with truth and understanding yourself. You don't need fluff. You don't think things need to be fluffed up and packaged and given to you nice to spare your feelings and cater to your ego. When you're working on this path, you want the raw dog truth, no matter how bitter it might hurt, no matter how joyful or happy or sad, painful or pleasant or blissful it might be. See, Samael embodies all of those things because in totality, all of those energies is what comprises understanding yourself and real personal truth. So I want you to take stock of that. Listen to all those descriptions. The medicine of God. We know medicine can heal, right? Medicine can heal on a multitude of levels. And healing spiritually can be on a multitude of levels, mentally, emotionally, physically, etc., spiritually, right? A drug, what can a drug do? A drug can intoxicate you. When you tap pure into the pure energy of Samael, it can be very intoxicating. Take you to higher states of mental comprehension, wisdom. It can give you a higher level of understanding that you can't get when things are sugar-coated and covered up and packaged and diluted, right? Then it goes on to use another term, the bitter beverage of God. I like to use that in aspect of, sometimes you hear that term, and it mentions it somewhere in the Bible too. The truth is sweet to the tongue, but bitter to the belly, right? I liken that when you do shadow work and you uncover traumas that have affected you. You might think you've mastered them and you've moved beyond them, but you might have been, as I said before, maybe you have fear of public speaking, and it's something that started in kindergarten, and you don't find out till you get in your 20s and 30s that it's still there. Maybe you were bullied as a kid in school, and that trauma is still there. Maybe you got mommy-daddy issues, bad relationships. Maybe you had a horrible upbringing with your mother and father, and that has affected you, all right? This is if we're talking about personal traumas. When you're working with the adversary on this path, you're going to face all that. Call it your personal demons, call it whatever you want, but you must face it in order to be successful on this path, all right? Then it goes on to say, in the Kabbalah, we learn that Samael rode a serpent into the Garden of Eden in order to talk to the woman. The serpent is the divine mother Kundalini. She is symbolized in the first letter of the name Samael, the letter Samak, right? Looks like a circle, almost the Ouroboros, which it's going to talk about. And it represents that serpent who eats its tail, the cosmic womb. The Ouroboros, the great serpent of the universe, is the ancient symbol deep in the heart of every religion. The dragon of nature, the great dragon, the great serpent. Samak is a circle that is constantly in motion, rotating, which represents the cosmic womb of the divine mother. And we know who that is. When you're working with the Klepothic tree, you will see sometimes, and we'll talk more about this in the Lilith class, you will see Lilith with her legs spread and symbols coming from her vagina or womb, right? Because remember, when you're on the Klepothic tree or working or understanding how it works, when you get to that 11th Klepothic, it's Lilith who guides you through the situation, right? Because when we look at the Klepothic, we know it's Samael and Lilith that are facilitating the energy that govern it, but we know it's the divine feminine, or as it says here, the divine mother, the cosmic, whatever you want to call it. That's another breakdown of the Ouroboros, right? We know things are constantly in motion, which actually goes back to your Hermetic principles. Nothing ever rests. Nothing is ever still. Things are constantly vibrating at different frequencies. A black adept or a black magician on this path understands that concept and knows how to apply it to their magic. That's what I've said many times before. I don't fuck with none of that banishing shit when I'm doing ritualistic work. I'm not trying to destroy or eliminate any energy. I'm trying to manipulate it, grasp it, understand it, and how can I do the work that I'm doing? We don't use banishing. That's more higher or lesser magic type of practices. Some might be familiar with, such as an OTO, and I can tell you this from being in OTO, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. That deals, in my opinion, with Kabbalah mysticism, because you're using the 4 archangels. I went over a little bit of that last week with Azazel, right, and how that all came about, and how those archangels were sent down to combat Azazel, which Azazel really represents us, because we take the choice to be the governors and rulers of our spirituality. We like, fuck the norm, we ain't conforming. We're going to do what we see fit. And that's why when you read in the book of Enoch and the Watchers, that's why I went over all that last week, you make a conscious choice or a decision, but you accept the responsibilities and the burdens that are going to come with it. You're going to get ostracized. People are going to talk shit because they don't understand it. Because anytime you go against the norm and you're not a mainstream conformist and you're not accepting what mainstream society dictates as the norm, you're going to be, a cast out. You're going to be, people not going to understand it. But The great dragon, the great serpent, Sama, let me continue with this, is a circle that is constantly in motion, rotating, which represents the cosmic womb of the divine mother, the fire, the base of all existence, the eternal cycle of life, night and day, dark and light. Now we also see there's a connection with that with Lucifer, right? In that form of the adversary. Now, you might read some books on the Klepothic and the demonic realm. They'll say Samael / Lucifer are the energies that facilitate or govern the Klepothic. I'm okay with that. Because in essence, when you work with the Klepothic realm, it's understanding how you or you too as an adept are supposed to embody light and darkness simultaneously. So that's an important point to understand. Now remember, this is just in a breakdown of the name. And I've never really done, I've talked about Samael, but I've never really done breakdowns on the name, the adversary in this form. So I want to kind of touch on to that because this is important to understand, because that's why I titled the video, The Angel of Death That Resides Within, because we have to dwell upon the angel of death that resides within to destroy those things about ourselves that need to be destroyed, tore up, and then reconstructed and reintegrated on this path for ourselves. That's all of our weaknesses. Your weaknesses are not necessarily a bad thing if you know how to deconstruct them and reintegrate them into your path. So if you have a fear, let's say, of public speaking, you can take that same fear, address it, master it, and come up with a system where you condition yourself to do a public presentation. I know that with some people, I ain't going to say no names. I know that with some people I've met couldn't speak publicly, but as they started doing ritualistic work, shadow work to clear blockages, remove emotional baggage, they did that shadow type of work, they were able now to stand forward. And now public speaking is a simple thing for them because they saw it was just an emotional fear that impacted them traumatically on a subconscious level. All right, let me just double check the screen. I think we good. Okay, looks like everything is good. All right, I think it was just that connection. All right, so this is important to understand. All right, but let me continue with this because there's some good shit in here. And again, if you want to look this document up, the document I'm reading from, it's not a book. If you have the Scribed app, I'm not sure if you can Google it and find it PDF on the internet. You might be able to. I love the Scribed app because it has a lot of these documents and PDF files. This is called Sons of Samael. It's a very short 16-page document going in depth and breaking down some of the key aspects of Samael. All right, so I might have tuned in or came in a little late. All right. In addition, the letter Samak is the 15th letter. Samak is the 15th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The 15th letter is related to the 15th arcanium, which is passion, the devil. But here's even deeper. What's 1 and 5? 6. What does the Bible say is the number of the beast? Right? 666, 6. You reverse that, it's actually 9s, right? If you add them all together each way, you have a multiple of 9. The sacred number is actually 9 encoded in the 6. Because when you look at it and break it down, if you add up 666, you get 18. 1 and 8 is 9. If you reverse it the other way, you get 27. 2 and 7 is 9. There's nothing beyond that. Okay? There's nothing beyond that, because then it starts all over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0, flip the 1. 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, when you get the point. That gets into something else. But the mystery of Samael is encoded in that 15th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the 15th arcanium, which is passion or the devil. If you look it up, you'll see it, right? But remember, its sacred summoning number is the 1 and the 5, which is 6. And that's why they say 666 is the number of the devil. Somebody's playing tricks on you. It's actually 9 reversed. And then how we come up with the 11, if I have time, I'll get into that. But there's more of a science to this. Is there hidden encodements in some of it? In some of it, yes. And it's easy to see if you do your research. All right. So we see here some very interesting contradictions. So we would say, so we would think, but this is part and parcel. This is integral to the nature of this great angel. Now, when we're saying that word angel, which is English, it comes from the Greek word angelos, right? In Hebrew, it's malak. It just means messenger. I want to make sure we're clear on that. Angel in English comes from the Greek angelos, right? And angelos from the Greek, they took that as a translation, a poor translation, by the way, of the Hebrew Malach, right? Malach Taus, for an example, peacock angel, Taus, peacock angel, right? So those are some of the key language. You need to understand that, because when we say some of these words in English, or not so much maybe us on the path know these things, but when you're running across newer people, ask them basic stuff like that. What does the word angel mean? What's the origin of it? Where did it come from? We see that in the Greek translations. Somebody is named in Spanish angel or archangelo. You might see that in the Latin or Italian. This is where this comes from. So this is important to understand. So that the mysteries of this angel messenger, right? Of this messenger, this great angel, duality, the positive and the negative. Here's the most important part. Why I want to do this is what Samael embodies: the positive and the negative, light and dark, black and white. Lucifer the tempter serves God. It is through Lucifer that the universe can exist. Nothingness. We have to defeat Lucifer, right? That's what they'll tell you, right? But in essence, okay, we get Lucifer as in religion as they do a tempter. You can even go to the traditions of the Yazidi. I talked a little bit about this at the conference. It's a good point that the author draws out here, that Lucifer, let me back up here. It is through Lucifer that the universe can exist, right? They believe, and this is just in their faith base, and I'm not passing this off as 100% factual information, but they believe that whole test of Iblis or Lucifer not bowing down or prostrating to Adam, that he actually passed the test by not doing it, because he is superior to what that scripture was called Adam, whereas religion is the reverse. It was considered he was rebellious and he was cast out. But when you read the Yazidi text on creation, they believe that this creator of the boundless universes created the universe and left Melech Taus or Lucifer here to rule this realm. It's a whole different story when you read it in that text. Now, I talk again, if you understand the history of the Yazidis, some might know them as the Kurdish. This is why they have been persecuted, one which consider mainstream Muslims. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. The second letter in Samael is Mem. Mem is the 13th letter and relates to water. The man represents the waters of life which are within the womb, both in the microcosm and the macrocosm. Mem is the basis of Ma'im, Mem, Yad, and Mem, which is Hebrew for the waters. You can now, mind you, this is all just in the name Samael alone. Keep that in mind. You can see that the letters Samek and Mem, it's from the waters of creation that all life emerges. So now we see the very essence of life encoded in the name Samael. What is this? What are we talking about here? See, we've heard this about this form of the adversary, but I don't think we've looked into it in depth as far as what it means. Hold on, let me check again the stream. I think we're still good, yeah. All right, cool. I think we're fine. All right. You can see that the letters Samek and Mem are very deeply connected. In fact, their shapes are very similar. Mem represents the Ma'im and the waters, and it is from the waters of creation that all life emerges. These waters are in the womb of the divine mother, Ma'aya, Mary, related to Mar, the sea. Furthermore, Mem is the 13th arcanum, which is the arcanum of death, immortality, signifying great change. So with these two numbers, 15 passion and 13 death, we can start to understand that somewhat disturbing about the nature of this angel. His name carries death and the devil. His name is related with passion, but also with the power of creation. Now, it's something interesting I find with those numbers. When you have 15, 1 and 5 is 6. You have 13, 1 and 4 is 10. 6 and 4 is 10. Now add them together. 15 and 13 is 28. Split them and add them to 2 and 8 is 10. You get 10 either way. So when it talks about renewal and redemption, let me say that again in case you missed it. Take them separate. 1 and 15. 1 and 5 is 6. Take the 13. Add them separately. 1 and 3 is 4. Add them together. 6 and 4 is 10. Right? Then take them as a whole. 15 and 13. Add them together. What do you get? 28. Now split that. Add those two single numbers together. You get 10 again. When you have the 1 and the 0, remember 1, 0, and starting on the other side is representation, death and rebirth, because it's a representation of creation starting all over. So that's why it says there's something very disturbing and mystifying with a lot that's encoded in this name. All right, there is the power of creation there, but in order to create, something must be destroyed. Okay, keep that in mind. Samael is a very potent name, a very powerful name, and a very contentious one, but do not forget it ends with El, meaning of God. In other words, we are talking about a messenger God, whose name carries death and temptation as powers of God. This is very important. The angel Samael is said to be related with the planet Mars, and he states that explicitly in the Zohar. The Zohar is something that Kabbalists, it's one of the mystical texts. If you're not familiar with it, you should research it. You'll see some of the stuff we're talking about in the Zohar. You can find English translations of it. I have a very small hardbound one of it with the English and the Hebrew. It's good to have both, in my opinion. And this is a quote from the Zohar. My entire domination is based on killing, and if I accept the Torah, there will no longer be wars. My rule is over the planet Madam Mars that indicates the spilling of blood. Now, there's multitude of ways of looking at that. Again, in order for something to be regenerated, renewed, created, something must be destroyed. Okay? Mars is related with the Sephira Gabor. Now, this is in the Kabbalah, which means severity, and is the fifth spear from the top down on the tree of life. Gabora is related with Mars and the sun in the domain of justice, security, punishment, but from God. In other words, when God needs to send his force to render judgment or punishment, it is the force of Samael, the angel, who does it, right? Now, that more so can be looked at as different perspectives of that. See? Yeah. I'm sorry. Where is this now? All right. So let me start there. When we look into the Garden of Eden, we see that Samael rides on the serpent. The serpent is the first letter of his name, Samek. And the serpent is the divine mother, Kundalini, and the very energy of creation. In the Bible, the serpent comes to tempt the woman in relation with the tree of knowledge. This indicates a very deep relationship between, this is important, divine knowledge, the knowledge of God, the divine mother, death, water, and the serpent. You must have an understanding of all of those things. Trust me when I tell you. All of these things are deeply profound, and the meaning is not easy to grasp. But what we can see is when we investigate the many traditions throughout the world, we find this tree, and we always find it related to the goddess. In the Egyptian tradition, Nut is the goddess of the tree of life. And we see pictures of her pouring out a liquid to sustain life of her followers. The liquid is the beverage of God. Remember, all this was encoded in the name, if you paid attention earlier. The medicine of Samael. Now we're seeing the elixir, we're seeing the medicine, we're seeing the intoxication. Watch. It is the ambrosia, amrita, or soma in Sanskrit terms. Soma gives the power of creation, the power of immortality. Immortality is the 13th arcanium, Mem, and emerges from the waters of the divine mother. When we acquire real knowledge, for example, just learning about this teaching, it can taste bitter. It can taste intense. It can shock us. It is the essence of this angel, Samael. It is a bitter beverage to the ego, right? It'll put the ego in check. Now, let me say this. Let me just go back and check the stream. I know I've been checking. I think we're good. Let me go back and say this. All aspects of the ego are not bad, so let's establish that. Your ego is what protects you. Your ego is what motivates you. Your ego is what gives you an understanding about yourself. Your ego is what motivates you to succeed and be successful. But there are aspects of your ego that can devour you and cause problems for you. So this path, unlike other paths that tell you, oh, suppress the ego completely, no, that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to know when to feed off the power of the ego. Excuse me. So when it says it's bitter to the ego in that particular excerpt, that's talking about when you get real truth about yourself. It'll put you in check. You might think you're the shit. You might think you know everything. You might think you got it all figured out. You might think you are so skilled and master of such and whatever it is. But as you do work on this path, you get reality checks. And that's what it's talking about. It can be a poisonous blow to the ego. So I just want to make this clear that this is not about trying to avoid dealing with those things. You want to face those things and embrace those things. All right. All right. So let me go back to that. Looks like the connection is good. I'm finish this material. All right. Okay. It is an intense and poison to the ego. It terrifies the ego because the angel Samael is the angel of death to the ego. So it can destroy and kill those things about the ego that are not productive for you. The angel Samael and Mars, Aries, the god of war against the ego. Aries, Mars, Samael is the same force. He wages his war on behalf of God, not for selfish purposes, and not to punish indiscriminately, but to punish on behalf of God with the permission of God. Now, this is a little but when you're looking and you're reading a document like this, remember the author's giving their perspective. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Now, something like this, I would put into perspective that, and I've said this before, who we're calling Samael, the devil, Lucifer, the monotheistic God of the Bible, there is no difference between them. That's how you should take this. And that's why I've always pointed out, do people really know who the biblical God is? And do people who are in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, do they really know who they're worshiping? I don't think most people do. All right? Because you're getting some of those answers here. Now, I don't suggest you go bashing religious people upside the head with this, because they're not going to accept it. They're going to think you're crazy because they don't study internally like that. You know, they just comfortable with Pastor Pork Chop and Reverend Rib telling them, because they got some piece of paper from a seminary, which sounds very close to cemetery. In the cemetery, you have physically dead people, and in the seminary, you have mentally dead people. And most religious people are taught not to question, because somebody's wearing a collar and has a title, reverend, preacher, pastor, priest, whatever, that you shouldn't question. So they're not going to see it, right? So let me scroll down. What else we got here? All right. The serpent is the divine mother. It is her essence and guiding force. Riding on its back is the angel Samael, who is there to tempt the woman for her own good. The soul grows when it conquers temptation, and the soul degenerates when it falls into temptation. So there has to be a bridge of harmony. You must be able to appease desires, but not be consumed by them. That's when it can be destructive to yourself, right? Samael, doing his duty, appeared in the garden to tempt the woman so that she would have an opportunity to learn from the tree of knowledge and to grow to advance, but she did not. She gave into her desire and failed. But remember that story, though. Who actually told the truth in that story? Because what were they told in that story in the Garden of Eden? Hopefully most people remember. She was told, if you partake of this fruit, you will die. And what did he say? He said, surely you will not die. Because they're afraid if you eat that, you'll become like one of them, one of the gods, knowing right from wrong, bad from good, etc. And that was the case, because the woman partook of the fruit. Did she die? No. So who was lying there? Who was the deceiver? Who was creating deception there? Was it Samael, or was it this monotheistic God. Because remember, they were told, if you partake or eat of this fruit, you will surely die. And they did not. And he came and said, that's a lie. They don't want you to eat that because you're going to become like one of them, like one of the Elohim. Become a god or a goddess, knowing right from wrong, good from bad. That's personal. So we have to keep that in mind. All right. All right. I think let me see if there's anything else I just want to scan through here. I'm not going to get into the whole Cain stuff. I'm going to skip some of that stuff. I think I've covered the base. I think there's something here. Hold on. All right. I think that covers majority of it. Yeah. I think I've covered what I pretty much wanted to get to. All right. So hopefully that gives you a general understanding. The encodement of the name and the numbers, that's very, very important, especially when you're working with the land. I mean, there's much more. Trust me, there's much more. But I wanted to kind of open a dialogue and getting a good general understanding. Now, when we talk about different paths of the adversary, and this being one, okay. Again, we have to get ourselves familiar with what those aspects of the adversary. Because again, I want to back up to something that I talked about in the very beginning, and it's an email and a question that I will get frequently. All right. Are these all the same thing? There's Samael, Lucifer, Satan, Iblis. Are these all the same thing? And as I said earlier, I want to focus on that for a minute or two. The answer to that question is yes and no. When we talk about an aspect, when we talk about archetypes, they serve different functions. Now we see when we look at the breakdown of Samael's, and notice there was a small portion that connected it to an aspect of Lucifer. Now, in essence, when one becomes the form of the adversary and the light bearer, they have now mastered the concept of embodying light and darkness simultaneously. So here comes an important aspect to understand. You need both, contrary to what some other paths might say. It's not just about dark this and gloom and doom this, but one understands they must go into that darkness, into that primordial chaos, and go into that deep, dark abyss to get an understanding of it, because it all emerges and has its point of origin from there. That's what Lucifer or Samael or Iblis or Melech Taus teach you to do. And when you look at it and apply it from an internal aspect and connect it to your shadow work, you're able to correlate and understand this a lot better. When we look at Samael and how we just broke it down, and what I find unique about Samael, now we can find his connection with the Divine Mother, Lilith, in this aspect when we're working with the Klepothic, because encoded in his name is that serpent, is that Kundalini, as it talked about. But really, that Ouroboros also can symbolically represent Leviathan. And the reason why I say that, because when it says it's a constant, continual flow of energy that's never ending, right? The tail in its mouth. And it also is symbolically represents the divine womb of the Divine Mother. The or definitions of what Leviathan is. Leviathan is. It is the principle of existence and continuity. Consistent existence, to be. It is. There is no, right? Oh, man, here goes the unstable shit again. Fuck. Oh, went away. I don't know what the fuck that is. Crazy. So hopefully in comments, I'm going to go through them. And Excuse me if I'm yawning, people. It's been long 3 days, and I've been up these last two, Monday and Tuesday, trying to catch up on shit. So I apologize if I'm yawning. My bad. All right. Okay, so first time tuning in, peace. Gustavos Revenge, welcome. Later, star. Okay. Yeah, as a Raya Infernal. I noticed, and not to sound spooky, because I'm people that know me, I'm the furthest from a spooky person. I do notice when we do talk about certain topics, the shit just cuts up. And I ain't trying to play conspiracy theorist. I'm just basing that also on a pattern like Azariah Infernal pointed out. I do see that. I know when I've had Val Cadman on a couple of times and we're talking about Samael and the Citra Akra or certain topics, the shit starts to cut up. So who knows? Now what else we got? Welcome back, Suspense Flow, Vanessa G. All right, here's a question from Ritual Spirit. Is it common for left-hand path individuals to have an additional spirit, as in a spirit that has possibly been with you since birth, primarily ancestral in origin? Most definitely. When working with, funny you bring this up because this question came up over the weekend, actually yesterday. The other day, Sunday, in the final class we did for the conference. You do, as you start doing your ritualistic work, you do start to get the awareness that you do have ancestral spirits that are passed down from lineage to lineage. They can be demonic spirits. They can be bloodline spirits. And usually it's revealed to you. It's not an iffy thing. You'll know. So if you're asking that question because you've had experiences with that, a good book that I mentioned before, a good left-hand path book that takes you away from a lot of the traditional aspects of venerating your ancestors and acknowledging them. There's a great section in Malthus's book, The Black Ship. I've mentioned that before. He's got techniques and methods in there on how to work with your ancestors from a left-hand path perspective. I would check that out if you haven't. But yes, now how that spirit is passed down from genealogy to genealogy, it tends to connect with somebody that's on the same wavelength of frequency. So if you are tapped in and connected to one of those spirits now, you will pass it on to somebody that's qualified to connect with it. Now, here's the deeper thing with that. You will also find out sometimes this spirit could have been passed on from a family ancestor that you never met. But because you might be vibrating on that same frequency, it reaches out and connects with you because you have put that energy out there via your ritualistic work to connect with it. And as I've always said before, and keep this in mind, ancestors are productive for you. So let's get out of that illusion, all right? And one, we don't worship our ancestors, all right? Because we are them, they are us. It is the same bloodline, it's the same DNA, it is the same genealogy. We show honor and respect by propagating our ancestors and connecting with them. But be very cautious and aware because, as I said before, you could have some ancestors in your bloodline that were serial killers, that were criminals. They could have been woman abusers when they were here, etc. Not all of your ancestors were productive. That's basic common sense. But usually through your ritualistic work, if things right, if you're doing your due diligence, your study, it's very easy to identify what it is you're connecting to when it comes to spirits, right? Because these spirits open you up to a whole other realm of possibilities, right? But yes, the answer to your question is yes. All right. Yeah, and just to piggyback off of Raven, typing in the chat again, reminding this Saturday for those. Actually, before I came on, I think 3 or 4 people signed. More people signed up. The class, the Lilith class, this Saturday, November 2nd, 3 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to sign up for that class, you have up until Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon. Send you the information. All right. All right. And again, reminder, New York, March 20th, 2020, the Black Flame 11. We will be doing a group work in Astoria, Queens. If you are in New York, surrounding areas, or tri-state area, or wherever you may be, you're welcome to come if you would like to. Hit us up. We have started a group that's based out of New York, which is Florida now. That's my hometown. That's where I'm from, born and raised, and I'm back and forth there frequently. We will be doing work there and doing events there in addition to here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. All welcome. But if you want to get down with the Black Flame 11, send an email. But again, you got to be about doing work. It's not a social club. It's not about being nosy, because you know the old saying, curiosity kills the cat. So if you're one of them curious cats, you're going to get smashed. You don't want to do that. All right. What else we got? Yes. So just to reiterate from an earlier, that Naldo M typed in, the poison of God or poison of El. In Samael, there's so many things encoded. When you really apply it internally, it really describes everything that goes on within you. It referred to the medicine of God, the poison of God, the drug of God, the smashing of the ego, the bitterness, truth to the belly, etc. The simplest way to put it is Samael don't take no bullshit, right? When you work with that energy, it's not for weak-minded, sensitive people. And I will say this, and I'll say this straight to the point, not cutting no corners, and I don't say this to scare people, but if you're a weak, sensitive punk, it's not the path to work with, because you will unlock portions of yourself that you probably are not aware of. And I'm not just talking about just the traumatic things or the shadow stuff. You might uncover some hidden power, talents, or aspects of yourself you didn't even think were within you. So it can be an emotional roller coaster, as it was described in the excerpt that we was reading earlier. It can be intense. So it is you're dealing with, as the name was being broken down, the Kundalini, the serpent, the dragon, the perfume of God, the poison of God, all those descriptions are accurate, because the best way I can describe it, and for those that have worked with Samael, you know what I'm talking about. It is very intense. Intense. If I had to say one word, intense on all levels. So, look, it's just like anything else you do on this path that you hear me say. Do your preparation work, do your research, don't jump into shit because it sounds cool. We don't do that on this path. Lead by an example. And the way you can get yourself jacked up, because when you start opening yourself up to energies that you're not prepared for, all types of shit can go haywire. Trust me when I tell you. If you got some issues you're not addressing, you're mentally weak, that could just compound and make it worse. Right? Because again, when you're activating these type of energies, it doesn't care, about your personal feelings and your emotions. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I know that might sound a little blunt, but it really doesn't. So you must be prepared and be willing to embrace what change is going to come after you start doing this work. And sometimes, as I said many times before, and I'm going to say most of the time, it's a change that's not the change you were focusing on. But when you really look into it, you'll see and realize, but that was the change, or is the change that you need. So sometimes that could be a little bit hard to take in all at once. because some people aren't prepared for the change that they need because they've been focusing on wants or what they think is the change that they need. And that could be that kind of smashes the ego, right? As I said earlier. Okay. Yeah, Ritual Spirit, the Witches book that I showed a couple of weeks ago by Colin Wilson. Uh, some good stuff in there, but I mean, just the artwork in there. I got it. I stumbled across it because I love the artwork in there. I mean, there's some jewels in there. They're breaking down. They're covering a lot of aspects of witchcraft and magic. There's even a small little section in there on the left-hand path. It's not a deep, intense book when it comes intellectual wise. So I want to make that clear. But it's got good general understandings, good breakdowns in the book. But again, the artwork I think is phenomenal. It's a really good book. Excuse me. Sorry, people. A good question by Dropship Fanatics. I wanted to ask about Samael, and I think you meant Michael. Maybe you just missed the E. And what is their connection to Angel Michael? Now, it's a good question, but it depends on what perspective you're coming. And let me give you an example. Let's start with the Angel Michael, first and foremost. If we're looking at it from a Christian perspective, most people look at the Angel Michael as one who comes to destroy this character called the devil. That's on the mainstream Christian church. They even have a whole prayer in Catholicism to Saint Michael the Archangel, right? If you look at it from the Book of Enoch or the Watchers, or somebody that's looking at it from a left-hand path perspective, the story is similar. It says, Raphael, Uziel, Michael, they came down to do battle with Azazel because Azazel was telling people to think for themselves, do as you please, right? This is still all under religion. Now, if we shift gears and we go into some magical paths or occult traditions, let's say Saint Michael, as they call him, San Miguel, is one of or the chief deity over that pantheon. But in some cultures, it's not depicted as it is in religion. He's a warrior, a warring angel, seeking power and destroying anything in its way. So you have different aspects in different cultures and paths of the angel Michael. And I'm saying that to say because I'm not sure what perspective or your take on what Michael is, or your understanding of the angel Michael. Now, as far as Samael and their connection, I don't know if there's really a direct connection because they totally have two different functions. So if we take the name Michael, which in Hebrew is Mikael, and Mikael means he who dares to be like El, right? Or he who is like God, some will say. So when you look at, when you decode it from an esoterical perspective, there really is no difference because Samael is trying to show you how to embody God, and Mikael is trying to be like God, right? So there's a similarity or a synchronicity in that when you look at it esoterically. That's how I look at it when I approach this path. I don't look at Michael from a religious perspective because really, he who dares to be like El. Now they say that name was given because, and this is religion, this is mythology, that when Iblis or Lucifer was told to bow down and make obeisance to Adam, and he refused, the religious story says, well, Michael stepped forward, and that's why he was given the name, he who dares to be like El. That's nice when it's concocted in a fiction story, but I don't look at it like that. But it's a good question. Excuse me. Wow. Alchemy Azazel Goddess. I love to subject resonates with me so deeply. Thank you, Brother B. No problem. As long as you're getting that. I told you what I do. I just put information out there. I'm not interested in, and I'm glad you like it. I'm not speaking to you now, but there'll be haters too. I'm not interested if you like it or if you hate it, that's personal. It's just information. You do with it what you see fit. But glad to see Alchemy Azazel Goddess. Yeah, that's a good name. Love that name. Okay, another question here from Ritual Spirit. How does one discern if they are actively working versus ancestors versus archetype TT? The difference? Well, it's very easy. And if you're having a difficulty, you might want to reevaluate and analyze your work because you might be doing something vacation, and you're not really understanding the vibration and the frequency that you're working with. Now, the first part of your question, spirits of the dead and the ancestors, they're kind of connected because ancestors that have transitioned on, in essence, are a form of spirits of the dead. Now, they're separate in the sense when you're working with, let's say, in voodoo or voodoo, the gay day, you have some Goetia or princes of darkness that are propagated at the crossroads, which are gateway deities. You can liken that to Papa Legba. Well, some spirits of the dead, they're gateway deities. They give you an understanding of what we know as the spiritual realm. Now, ancestral spirits, which connected to you by blood, can give you personal guidance through your family lineage. So that's kind of the difference. They're connected, but slightly different. Now, archetype deities and death current, when working with the spirits of the dead, that's just another term for working with the spirits of the dead or the death current. Even Santissima Muerte, the Holy Death would fall in that category. And archetypes would be when we go into one of the pantheons, such as Egypt, when we look at the Egyptian Natiru, or if we go into or whatever it might be, those are archetypes. And it's very easy to tell the difference because of their functions described. Now, part of the problem that could come in that understanding is the archetype part. And I'm not saying you, Ritual Spirit, I'm just speaking in general. Where some people are still approaching the archetype from an external aspect, and that's a huge mistake, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in essence, when you're looking at archetypes, you're manifesting them from within. You're activating a portion of your psyche, which connects you to what the archetype represents via your unconscious, as they say, all right? That's the difference. Which ancestral spirits or spirits of the dead, in this case, first your ancestral spirits, these are things that are actually connected to you by blood, that there's a direct link. It's the same thing when you're working with demonic spirits or the Goetia or the princes of darkness, the princes of hell, whatever terminology they give them. These are actually spirits that you connect with energy-wise via vibrational frequency and energy. So there's a difference because they function. Now, how you tell the difference is very easy. One, because when they appear, and it's hard to explain in words, but when that energy manifests itself, you automatically resonate and connect with it, and you are aware of what it is for doing your work. But if you're a person, and I'm speaking in general, I'm not saying that's you. If you're a person, okay, that has done work before, you've done rituals, you're familiar with the energy, and the best way to know the difference, I always tell people, when you start working with these different deities and spirits, start off with just simple basic invocations to connect them with these energies or meditations, because what will happen is when you do, starter things like that, you get yourself acclimated with the energy. As opposed to just diving right in, doing some deep, dark, intense shit that more than likely, you may not understand if you do diligence, your research and your work, Or two, it can cause a lot of, you know, it can fuck you up even more, make matters even worse, unfortunately. All right. So those are just some methods and techniques to help and assist you. You're able to identify them by the consistency of your work. And it's that simple. So hopefully that at least gives you a decent understanding. No, I did not post the link, but let me see if I could do it now for the document. Hold on. I don't know if I could do it from here because it's on scribed. Hold on. All right, yeah, I can copy the link. All right, so let me do that now. I'll put the link in the chat right now. Okay, there it is right there. Now that's the link to Scribed. Obviously, you're going to need the Scribed app, which you've heard me mention many times over the last few years. It's a app. It's like, I think it's $8 a month. You can find a lot of occult left-hand path stuff. You can Google it. So that link I just put in is the document link for it on Scribed if you have the Scribed app. Now, again, when you read that document, there is some religious stuff in there, which I didn't really waste my time on. But remember, having a Luciferian mindset and deciphering knowledge, you need to gravitate towards what resonates with you, and the rest of it you just leave alone. I don't agree with everything in that document. I took some key points out of there. I do in strong agreement with the name, and I think just in the decoding of the name and the 15th and the 13th arcane of passion, the devil, and how that was broken down, I'm in strong agreement with that, because we can connect with that of how we work with it on our path. From what I took from reading that document, the person that wrote that, or the people that wrote that, they are conscious on some level. I don't know what they classify themselves with, but then you get the point. All right, so I posted that. Good point by Dropship Fanatics. Azazel is a fire spirit from another realm. I worked with him. He is a king of jinn and demons. Saturn is not Azazel. Yes. And we talked a little bit about Azazel as a spirit. We mentioned that before in the past. And again, that's where we have to educate ourselves with the, I don't know who's calling in, but I'm not taking calls at the moment. All right, so just give me a few minutes and then we'll get into that. All right, hold on. Let me get through a few more of these, and then if somebody wants to call in. All right. And then Naldo M typed in earlier, 2 + 1 + 8. Yeah, 11. That's true. Didn't look at that either. 6 you look in the mirror. Angles are angles of light that draws your pineal gland to give you enlightenment. Yes, I've heard that before. That hits your pineal. All right. All right, what else we got here? Oh, damn. There's a good comment from Al Azazel Goddess. So the ego has different as else. We think we know, yet we don't. Yes, and there is different degrees to the ego, as I mentioned earlier. Contrary to most spiritual systems will teach you everything about the ego is a negative thing. That is not true. Because ego, as I said, is what protects you. When you go into a mode, that's the ego that does that. When you are motivated to be successful, whether it's in sports or your career, your profession, your job, or your business, that's your ego. Whether you're a student in college or in an institution and you are striving to be the best student or master, whatever it is you are mastering in. Notice they use what are you trying to obtain a master's in, right? That's your ego. Are there destructive aspects of the ego that can consume you? Most definitely. Remember, that's the difference with this path and other paths. It gives you both aspects of it. So it's not all suppressing the ego completely. That is a bunch of bullshit. But you do need to control portions of your ego that can get you into serious shit. For an example, just rage and anger can be a bad thing. It can also be a productive thing, because look, we could take the emotion hate. The average person will say, hate is evil, it's bad, you should never hate. Hate is a bad thing, this and that. Well, if I hate a toothache, is that a bad thing? If I hate somebody who innocently harms innocent children, I'm sorry, is it wrong to hate a person who harms innocent children? Is there such thing as productive hate? Think about it for a minute. Do I hate when innocent people die and want to hate? So here we could take an emotion or an energy where to just hate on somebody because they're successful and out of jealousy you want to kill them. That is a hate that can consume you, right? That is an aspect or an emotion that is positive for your growth. So we got to look at there's two sides to that. It just depends on your perspective and how you're perceiving it, right? So yes, there are different degrees to the ego, and all aspects of the ego are not bad, contrary to what everybody says. Yes, and when I was talking about the zero, you have, because really when you look at it on the other side, when you have the 10, the 0 for the 1, really the 0 comes before the 1. You have 0, 1, but when the binary code shifts, as angels say, then you have the 1 and the 0, and then it starts all on the right side. So that's why I was saying it represents a starting point, even though the 1 is before it. But that's after it shifts, because remember, when we look at, even when we count, 0 comes before the 1, right? So it's really 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, then 1, right? For the shift, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then the 1 shifts to 2, 0, 1, 2. You get the point. So there's always, in order for that change, 0 cipher. There's many ways to look at that. All right. All right, I'm getting low down to the chat. I could probably start taking some calls in a minute. I know somebody called in. They could probably call back in about 2 minutes. But let me answer this one question here, and then we can take some phone calls, and then I'll go through the rest of the chat for a little bit. Stay on for about another 30 minutes, maybe. Damien asks a question. Hey, Brother B, I have noticed that when branching out to learn more about the Goetia, I have noticed that I may be a bit more indoctrinated by traditional Christian views than I thought, and that's a good thing to get that awareness. I'm wondering, can I invoke Santa Muerte in my spiritual path to help cut away these mental ties they may have, as I am comfortable with Santa Muerte? Yeah, because it's a road clearing archetype, but don't just work with things you're comfortable with. That's fine. Start there. But you can use any energy that would be classified as a road clearer, a path clearer. Okay, Santa Muerte was good because it's a spirit of the dead that bridges the gap to that understanding. But activating the eye of Lucifer, if you're working with the Goetia and the demons, find ways to activate that Lucifer, because that'll give you the light and the intellect to remove that indoctrination. You see what I'm saying? You want that removed, but what better way than get it, get that intellect from the light bearer. Because see, what happens is, but that's a good thing. I want to back up. Don't think because that's happened, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means whatever you've tapped into has given you the awareness, and that's part of shadow work. Sometimes you uncover certain things that you didn't realize were there on that level. And this is a great example. So look at the upside to this. If through your work you get awareness that you were indoctrinated and you've established that and you've recognized a great thing, it's even better that you're looking to take steps now to address it. And I want to say that now because a lot of people do work, they find out what the problem is, but then they don't develop no plan or come up with any solutions. So then what's the fucking point? So I would suggest, based on what you said, if you feel that's how you feel right now as far as in relation with the holy death, start there. But I would also suggest you challenge yourself, because remember, this path is not about being comfort in your comfort zone. You want to make yourself a little uncomfortable and a little uneasy. You want to challenge yourself because it keeps you sharp. If everything is just easy and easily obtainable, it doesn't have the same beneficial effect. And one thing we do on this path, we're always trying to challenge ourselves. We're always exploring new methods, methodologies, and ideas. We're always open to and receptive on all levels. So, but if that's where you feel comfortable starting for now, most definitely. All right. No, I am Boston. Let me stop. I'm a Yankee fan. That's why I say that. I actually got peoples up that way, and also in Providence, Rhode Island. All right. Vanessa G is from Ontario, Canada. Okay. Damien says, all right, we'll take this call. Somebody calling in. Let me take this call real quick. Greetings, call. What's your name and where you calling from?
This is Ezra from Knoxville.
Hey, how you doing?
I have a pretty serious question, but I feel like it goes in tied with the poison of God aspect of Samael.
Okay.
But I noticed in a lot of spiritual conscious communities, there's especially melanated ones, there's an underlying hatred towards Caucasians and stuff.
Right.
And it's a little bit overt with the Hebrew Israelites
Sure.
and stuff like that.
Sure.
But how could we actually use tap into that energy of all the hatred that people are trying to get and where they're trying to steal your energy? How could we tap into that energy and use it to boost our path or to manifest something we want in our life?
That's a really good question. Well, first, let me say this. Unfortunately, those paths you mentioned, and we consider those lesser paths because they have a lesser understanding. Let's first establish this, and then I'm gonna get to. That's a really good question. Let's talk about that. This path, they're in that ignorance because whether it's white supremacy, black supremacy, or whatever it may be, it's all bullshit. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna find out it has nothing to really do with that. But that's used as a gauge. Because most people need a crutch to lean on. And usually when you belong to organizations like promoting the dominance of a specific ethnicity or race, it's usually to mask their insecurities and fears. And having said that, regardless of your ethnicity or race, and I've said this a million before, this path is open to all, as long as you're willing to do the work. Because when the information that we're dealing with goes beyond, and most of those paths deal with a lot of religious rhetoric, even if it's a conscious path, when they get into all this Kemet and Egypt stuff, which, look, I'm not saying there's nothing in those levels of information that have some validity, but when it's used to justify hate and to attack people, not only do they just attack race, then there's this big attack, and I've said this a million times before, on homosexuality, right? And usually the people who attack homosexuality have they're hiding their homosexual feelings and they're masking it. And I'm just going to call it for what it is. And we don't attack people on this path for their sexual preference either. That's your personal choice. Now, other paths will use not only just race, they'll use and attack sexual preference because it's what their religions and their dogmas and systems are centered around. So I just wanted to throw that quick disclaimer out there. Now, as far as your question, it's very easy to use that energy, right? when they're putting that hate out into that, now this takes, you can liken this to sorcery, and it's a simple mental thing. You don't need no altar to do this. You don't need elaborate ritual setup to do this. Let me give you an example. If you see one of those videos, you mentioned the Hebrew Israelites. Watch this. If you see him, one of the guys in them videos, or maybe you're in an area where you're fortunate to run into one of them. I used to run into them all the time in New York. And when they're at their peak and carrying one of their rants, and they're at this emotional high, and the anger and the rage is running through them, you can actually, if you're good enough to do it on the fly, let's say you're trying to get rid of a bad habit. You can stand there literally while they're talking in front of them, and when they get to a pit of rage, tap into that emotion, that adrenaline, and visual that energy that you steal from them, visualize it. Let's say you're trying to break a spending habit or whatever. I'm just giving you a quick example. You can just visualize and feel, but you got to feel it. When they're doing it, feel that rage and hate that's running. You could do it watching a video. You can do this with anybody. You could take any of that energy, again, via mental sorcery, manipulate it to somebody. But what you're doing is you're taking that power. And it's also vampiric in nature to an extent, because that would be also considered a form of psychic vampirism. So let me throw that out there. So I would say from a psychic sorcery / vampiric aspect, and you'd have to do it on the fly. So again, that's not that would take a skilled magician doing that, a magician that's disciplined. And you could do that in public and nobody would even know what the fuck you were doing. So that's not something that needs to be done at an altar. I'm saying that to say I have done that, not so much with the, but I have done that in some shape, form, or fashion. Where you could steal somebody's rage and anger and manipulate it and benefit it for yourself. And I actually did that to get myself more disciplined. This was a few years back on my exercise. So there's many ways you can use it. So hopefully that answers part of your question.
Absolutely, 100%.
But it's a great question. And just the fact that you're thinking some shit like that, that's good to hear, because it's a very good question. Very good question.
Awesome. Well, many blessings.
Say it again.
That was pretty much my only question.
Oh, I appreciate it. No problem. And thank you for calling. I did, for those that might want to call in, I did put the call-in number at the bottom of the screen. I'll stay on for a little bit more if you got a question. Or if you have a comment you would like to add to the discussion. The number's at the bottom, 561-962-137. All right, I'm going to keep continuing for a little bit more through the chat. See what else we got here. Okay, so Damien continues about the Holy Death. I know she was very territorial, but I've tapped into this energy, and I've said before, I use Santa Muerte as more of a spiritual beacon / antenna. Well, yeah. Acclimated, and it's good. You have your connection with the energy. You seem to be acclimated with it. So roll with it. Don't question it. I'm not saying you're doubting it, but don't second guess it or reevaluate it. Seems like you're pretty confident and locked in with how you connect with that particular archetype. So roll with it. I just say explore it to the fullest. And everybody's going to connect. There might be a similarity in the connection overall, like say with a deity or is the Holy Death, but everybody's going to have a personal niche with it. And from what I'm seeing and what you're typing in, it seems like you have that personal niche. Roll with it. You know, go with it. All right. Good comment by Kalina and Joe. Poison of the false self. Proclaim God. If I think that's in relation to when we were talking about the biblical God. And I was saying earlier, that's what Samael does. He removes systems of indoctrination. He makes you see things for what they really are. And as the author wrote in that document, which I thought was important, it's a very poisonous, intoxicating energy, right? He gave many different breakdowns in the name, Samak, and the letters. creation, emergence from the waters. There's the connection of the micro and the macrocosm. So much shit encoded there. I mean, we could be here all day breaking it down. Why is this important for us as adepts or black magicians, whatever we want to call ourselves on this path? You take these concepts and you apply it to your ritualistic work. Now you should have a better breakdown when we talk about the Citra Akra and the Klepothic realm. And now you understand why Samael and Lilith are the facilitators of the Klepothic. Now you know why you go through Thamuel and all the other Klepothic demons in order to get through the Klepothic. And then when you show and you present yourself to Lilith and you show you have that lust, that raw desire, not just sexually, but you have that raw lust and desire and quest and thirst for knowledge. That's when the hand symbolically of Lilith reaches out and snatches you and takes you to the Citra Akra, to the dark side, to the night side, to the abode of demons. Now you are showing that you are sincere. Sincere in the sense that you have mastered yourself via your shadow work. We're going to talk about this more in depth on the class on Saturday. We will get into the sexual aspects of Lilith. We will get on. We're going to show you the physical and the spiritual with that on Saturday. How to work with the sigils, what it all means. Just some stuff I don't was appropriate to talk about openly. Yes, I know people talk types of shit on YouTube, but you got to be careful because sometimes things can be taken out of context, and I don't want to do that. So in those class settings, I can go as graphic and detailed as I see fit. And we're going to do that. And this is important to understand because as in Clean as Cons, once the false illusionary self is removed, that's when the journey starts to begin. Your journey hasn't begun until you've done real shadow work, until you've really removed the illusions and the veils that you put up around and about yourself. And all you've done for years before you came to this path was mask it and cover it. I don't care if you were Buddhist. I don't care if you were some form of Kemetic consciousness. I don't care if it was Ifa. I don't care what it was. All that did was create more veils on top of veils, which in turn created more delusions and illusions. This path starts with breaking those down, just breaking all those barriers down, destroying them, and to see things for what they really are. And that's when all of these symbolicism of what Samael kicks in, the intoxication, the poisonous elixir, the bitterness to the belly, and then some of the eternal bliss of it, intoxicating like a drug, right? The perfume of God, as they say, right? And we know perfume or the smell of perfumes can be very pleasant and intoxicating, right? This is all in the breakdown. And then as it said that the serpent, and it likened to the Ouroboros, and in the second letter of the name, Samek Lem, it represents the serpent, or what one would Kundalini, or the Ouroboros with the tail in its mouth, right? And that represents the cosmic womb of female. We know symbolically who that female is. Inside that womb is darkness. Think about this for a minute. We all resided in a deep, dark, watery abyss for 9 months before we were born. You were submerged, you were prepared and bathed in darkness for 9 months before you came here. What do you think the Egyptian story of Nun was trying to tell you? The chaotic waters of Nun. You went through those transitional stages in the deep, dark, watery abyss, which was in the womb of the divine mother or female. And this is why I said you will see images of Lilith, which some might think is very graphic, where she's perched or sitting down and her legs are open, exposing her vagina, and you might see things, spiritual symbols of things coming out of her vagina. If that's representation of the womb of the divine mother. So this is all the symbol. You can use a lot of this stuff to connect with in your ritual and your magical work. It's that simple. Okay. Naldo Hammond, what's a good way to come in contact with Samael. Okay. There's actually a couple of ways. Let me pull up something here real quick. I'll show you something. Hold on 1 second. Pull this up real quick. Okay. All right. I've said this before that Samael, a good way to connect, not just with Samael, but a lot of these, whether you want to call them telepathic energies, demons. I've said this with Lilith. I've said this with Lucifer. Invocations or summonance in the spirit. You could put it in your own words. But one of the most powerful ways, in addition to that, is taking the sigil of Samael and anointing it with a few drops of your own personal blood, and then doing the invocation. That, in my estimation, is a mandatory no. But remember, there's life in the blood. And when I say, let me make this clear for those listening, because sometimes people misinterpret. Safely, a few drops of your personal blood by just simply pricking your finger with a lancet or a ritual blade, kind of like how you make a blood pact. I just want to make that clear, because sometimes information gets put out there. So I'm saying, I'm making sure I'm making that clear in a safe way to do this. Is it mandatory or necessary? No. But I have found in my own practices, it becomes more powerful and the connection with the energy is instant. Trust me when I tell you it's instant, because there's life in the blood. And when that energy is exchanged via the blood, it makes that automatic connection. So quite simply, I would tell you, or the way I would answer that question is by way of invocations, sigils is a great way to start. Okay. Damien, I've also seen some people work with higher demons or demons like Lucifer instead of goetic demons at first, because they govern a higher power than most others. I agree with that, because I think when you activate the Lucifer energy first, that facilitates all that comes from it, whether you're working with Belial or Lilith or Hecate or Naama. It doesn't matter. All of that is facilitated via the Lucifer energy. And I actually suggest people that are going to work with these type of energies start there. Matter of fact, the ritual that we're going to do in New York in March is kind of going to be centered around that, activating the eye and the energy of Lucifer, because the light bearer, who embodies light and darkness simultaneously, is what one needs to create the inner harmony. I don't like to use the word balance, because balance goes against every aspect of black magic, the practitioner, and the 7 hermetic principles of Tahuti. Because when things are balanced, they're not moving, they're still. And nothing rests, nothing is ever still. So I don't like that word balance. I'm going to use and say, like I've been saying, harmony. The Lucifer energy activates the necessary harmony that the adept needs to be well-rounded, he or she. All right? Blair asks a question. If you visualize your warrior spirits, well, we could just say spirits in general, in motion, can other spiritual people see it working in that way? Yes, those who have disciplined the eye to see it. I'm not talking this eye. Most definitely. There are those that are trained who can see it and sense it. It's a game. to a seance or an Egon or a spiritual Misa, you will find at those gatherings, there are many who are trained to see things like that. So yes, there are some that have the ability, they can see that. But they would have to be on a similar or like you, if that's the case. If that's the case. All right, so here's a question from Blade of Astoreth. Actually, I just thought of this as a beginning question. How does one know when they are in fact ready to dive in and do this work? What are some signs that, well, this is a good question, but a question that comes up all the time. Real simple answer. How you know when you're ready is you feel 100% doubt, you're not going back and questioning yourself over and over. If you are unsure, and if you're asking, I know you're just asking in general, but if you're asking, you got to ask yourself, am I ready now? Am I sure or not? That's the answer. You'll know because the feeling of certainty that overcomes you, where you're just going to want to dive in, and you're going to want to dive in because you've done the necessary work. You got enough data to the point where you feel you know and you're aware, which is going to give you the confidence and the ability to jump in. But if you got, this is how you know you're not ready. If you got to keep going back, like say you go, oh yeah, I'm ready. Let's do this. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to start some work. And then you go, well, then you start, maybe I should. Well, maybe I need to look at, maybe. Don't do it. You're not ready. Okay? You're not ready. So you'll know. It'll be clear. And it'll be a feeling and a presence and an awareness. And that doesn't just, that can apply to a multitude of aspects. But yes, that's the best way I can. Damn. Skipped on it. All right, here we go. Ritual spirits listening to it in alignment as a tribal drama class. That's funny. This is a good question by Obadiah Desaveu. Is there some sync between Saturn and Saturn, the whole death thing? That's up to you. Yes, when you look at it from an aspect, because they have similar functions. Would mainstream people tell you that say maybe work with Samael? It just depends on the perspective that they come from. Most probably wouldn't say there's a literal connection, but when you look at it from a spiritual or esoterical point, there is a connection because there are some similar functions. Yes. Okay, so Shebek says, Dark Greetings. I saw your comment about working with Tiamat. I'm going to keep working with that book and use more correspondence for my rituals. Good, good. Okay, I guess we're ready. Azariah, that was you earlier, they called in. And that was a good question earlier. All right, that's the calling number I put earlier. Oh, there's my boy, Peter Gosanya. All right, I'm going to finish with these last couple of questions in the chat, and I think I'm going to wrap it up here. What is the best way to shed religious programming we were raised with or born into? Thank you. That's a tough one, Peter. And that's not something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process. All right, so look at it this way. How you shed it, one, is by reprogramming the subconscious mind, by reading the materials and the information on this path that destroys and then reconstructs by giving you the truth to a lot of those religions, which is going to come via your reading and your study. Your personal ritualistic work is probably the most important and powerful tool. The purpose of doing ritual is to transform. Transform what? To transform yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and in some cases financially. So that's why doing those things is it deprograms you. Now, the other side to that is, keep in mind, I don't know how old you are, but let's just say you come on this path in your 30s or 40s. That's a lot of deprogramming you have to do. So I say that to say it's not going to happen overnight. It might take weeks, months, years. Because remember, all that stuff is embedded in the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is like the hard drive on a computer. It stores all that shit there. So I say it's going to take time because as you are on this path, studying, learning, and then doing obviously your ritualistic work and your shadow work, it's going to give you that awareness. It's gonna give you the information you need, and the deprogramming process becomes natural. You just start to see focusing on it no more, and then there'll be a moment later down the road where you'll go back and go, you know what? It's funny because I don't even think about that shit no more. Religion, this and that. Okay, so best thing I can tell you. Okay, the apt patcher was scribed. I see somebody typed it in right below there. No, juice cakes, juju cakes, that juice cakes. The fuck? I just called juju cakes, juice cakes. Fuck, where's my head at? Sorry. Yes, she's a road clearing energy. Lilith, well, man, I'd add about several other things on top of that. Road clearing in the sense only because she brings very intense change to the adept who's traveling the night side. She will shake up about you what needs to be shaken up and, yes, destroy it. So, yeah, there is that connection there, definitely. Naldaland says, thanks so much for the info, brother. Much appreciated. You're welcome. Okay. Yeah, I noticed on this computer, Sheldon, sometimes it's when I'm moving around the audio. I gotta work on that. You got it, Damon. Okay. Okay, so you're 46, Peter, and that's going to be the last question. I think I'm at the end of the chat. So yeah, I don't know. You're 46. I don't know at what age you started your journey on this path, but let's just say it was 45, 44, 40, 30 something. Remember, if you come in at 35, that's 35 years of deprogramming that you have to do. You understand what I'm saying? So that's not something that's going to disappear overnight. That's something that's going to disappear as you consistently do work. And when I tell you it just starts to fade and fall away, it literally does. The beauty of it is, you know, you look at the youth, like my two sons. You know, I got one that's just turned 27. And then my little guy who is sick. Birth to our kids, they don't have to be indoctrinated with the Christianity. Because now we break the chain by teaching them the correct way. And my two sons are born into this. Doesn't mean they're not going to be affected in movies, religions, but they get a way better head start than we did. So long story short, Peter, to the things that I explained earlier, but keep in mind the time, the amount of years of indoctrination that need to be rid from the subconscious. All right. All right. Be back on Thursday night. Again, don't forget the Lilith class this Saturday. For those that are signing up for the Lilith class, you have until Friday afternoon, this Saturday, 3 to 6:30 p.m. If you need to contact me for a spiritual reading or a spiritual consultation, send me an email and put in the email, please, your days and times you are available and the time you live in. I know some people sent emails before I came on. I'm not going to be checking no more emails tonight. I will get back to anybody that emailed me early this evening up until now. I promise I will get back to you tomorrow at some point, not tonight. I got some stuff I got to do, and then I got to get some sleep. So send me an email, days and times you're available, time zone, and whether you want a consultation or a spiritual reading. I'll have a ritual for the end of the month, probably mapped out by the end of the week. All right. We'll be back on Thursday. I have no idea what the fuck we're going to be talking about, but you know me, I'll figure something out. All right. All right. Appreciate everybody tuning in. See you guys on Thursday.